Pakistan carries out strikes inside Iran. Islamabad says it's in retaliation to attacks by Tehran inside its country. Both nations say they're targeting separatist armed groups. But what might the consequences be, and can they be contained? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Elizabeth Puranam. Iran and Pakistan have launched attacks across their border and into each other's territory. Both say they're targeting armed groups and used national security to justify their actions. Armed groups in the Balochistan region have been launching attacks in Iran and Pakistan for years. Both governments accuse the other of not doing enough to stop them. But these latest unilateral military strikes have raised tension between the regional powers that could undermine joint efforts to secure the border. We'll go to our panel in just a moment, but first, Fintan Monahan has this report.
The aftermath of an Iranian attack on Pakistani territory. 2 children among those killed. Iran's foreign ministry said it was targeting armed groups hiding out in the border region.
Pakistan is our neighborly country, a friend and our brother. It was not the target of Iran's drones and missiles. This is an Iranian terrorist group that has taken refuge in Pakistani territory.
Pakistan's response came within 24 hours. An attack on Iranian territory. Pakistan's foreign ministry said it was also striking armed groups along the border.
This morning, Pakistan undertook a series of highly coordinated and specifically targeted precision military strikes against terrorist hideouts in Sistan, Baluchistan province of Iran. A number of terrorists were killed.
The Baluchistan region spans both countries. Some armed groups there are fighting to gain independent homelands. Others are demanding better treatment for Sunnis in Iran. Attacks have been carried out in both countries. And Iran and Pakistan have exchanged accusations in the past that not enough is being done to fight armed groups in the borderlands. Iran and Pakistan both said they respect each other's sovereignty, but justified the strikes on grounds of national security. Although relations between the two states appear reasonably cordial, the attacks have raised tensions. Pakistan's caretaker prime minister and Iran's foreign minister met at the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, just hours before the first strike. And their countries' navies have been carrying out joint drills near the Strait of Hormuz. Regional powers, including China, are calling for calm. Now that both sides have launched strikes, some hope that this may be possible. But there are also fears of further escalation. Fintan Monahan, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
We have a panel of distinguished experts on Inside Story today. In Lahore, Pakistan, Ahmed Rashid is a preeminent expert on armed groups in Pakistan, Afghanistan and Central Asia, and is a former resident of Balochistan. In Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, Maliha Lodi is a veteran diplomat and columnist for The Dawn newspaper and website. And joining us from Mashhad in northeastern Iran is Mohammad Marandi, professor of the University of Tehran. A very warm welcome to the program. Mr. Rashid, I'll start with you in Lahore. Are the two sides even now that Pakistan has retaliated, or does the Pakistani strike raise the risk of escalation?
Well, the problem is that, yes, there is an international dimension to this conflict, which you've just raised. But what is being ignored very much by the media and by other experts is the local paradigm, which is much more complicated. For example, it's the fact that each state, Iran and Pakistan, have been bombing their own citizens. They've been bombing them in their respective countries, but they've been bombing them themselves. Both countries, Iran and Pakistan, have faced terrorist threats from within the Baloch community, and they have failed to deal with them, and they have failed to win a victory against these extremists and terrorists. However, the bulk of Baloch, both in Iran and in Pakistan, are not terrorists. They're probably the most poorest ethnic group in South Asia. They've been deprived of education, of development, of almost everything. And much of their protest is aimed at trying to get attention to the fact that they are being deprived. Right now in Islamabad, there's a massive demonstration of Baloch women who have done a sit-down in a bid to garner attention to the fact that their husbands, their male relatives have been missing for many years. So these kinds of things, as long as they go on, in Iran, it's the same situation.
All right, let me put that to Mahila Lodhi in Islamabad. By carrying out these retaliatory strikes, I suppose, by Pakistan, is Pakistan attacking groups that are fighting for greater autonomy or even independence from Pakistan? Is it attacking its own people, as Mr. Rashid is saying?
I think we need to keep the focus on what's happened between Iran and Pakistan. We need to first acknowledge that Iran fired the first shot, as it were, and created a situation to which Pakistan was compelled to respond. For many years, in fact, militant groups have had sanctuaries on both sides of the border. At least that's been the accusation of one country against the other. And I think the surprise element was that when Iran conducted this strike on Pakistani territory, there was in fact a high-level Iranian delegation in Islamabad. And Pakistan and Iran were also holding joint military exercises. So several channels of communication were open between Islamabad and Tehran to address this issue, which of course remains unresolved and needs to be addressed. As I said, there are militant groups. Pakistan accuses Iran of providing sanctuary to militant groups on its side of the border, and Iran also accuses Pakistan of providing a haven for, or at least these militant groups are to be found on the Pakistani side of the border, according to Iran. So I think this unresolved issue is really at the heart of what has happened. But what has happened. Pakistan took a proportionate response to what Iran had done. And I think now we're looking at a pause. I don't think it's in the interest of either country to further escalate the situation or to inflame the situation. So we have to wait and see how and when de-escalation begins to take place, because I don't think we are going to see any further escalation in this situation.
Mr. Marandi, what do you say to that? And what Ms. Lodhi is saying is that there were many open channels of communication between Iran and Pakistan, and yet Iran chose to carry out the strike on Pakistani soil, despite calling Pakistan a friendly and a brotherly country. Why did it do that?
Well, there are two or three things here. First, going back to what Ahmed said, he is correct. This area in Pakistan and Iran is more backward than other parts of these two countries. One reason is the American sanctions, by the way, because Iran and Pakistan were planning to have a major gas pipeline, and the Americans blocked it. And so a lot of things that can be done between the two countries aren't being done, and that makes this area a dead end. The second is that this attack that took place from the Iranian side, it comes within a context. The Israelis, ever since the genocide began in Gaza and the war began, they've been mobilizing to retaliate against Iran because Iran supports Hamas. Iran helps them. That's why they're able to build tunnels and they have defense capabilities. Iran supports Yemen. It supports Hezbollah. We all know that. And so Israel wants to retaliate, and they've been activating terror groups in Kurdish areas in Iraq, where the Iraqi central government has less control, and alongside the Pakistani border, where the Pakistani government has it's less governed, partially because Pakistan is focused on India. It also, like us, it has problems with Afghanistan. The border area is a problem, and there are many Pakistanis who come to Iran for because of economic problems. So there's a large Pakistani community alongside the border.
But are you saying, Mr. Marandi, that Israel has groups that it controls on the border between Iran and Pakistan? That it can ask, that it has such control?
Yes, Israel does fund elements of ISIS. It does fund elements within the Kurdish separatist groups, and it does fund Jaish al-Ad. Before, Jaish al-Ad was also funded by countries in the Persian Gulf, some countries, but that's ended. And ISIS and Jaish al-Adl both are Wahhabi groups. That funding is ended. There's nothing coming from any country in the Persian Gulf region anymore, as far as I know.
Okay,
but
let me put what you're saying. Let me put what you're saying to Mr. Rashid. What do you think of what Mr. Marandi is saying, that Israel funds groups, including Jaish al-Adl, and that they are acting on behalf of Israel, and that Pakistan doesn't have control of the security in Baluchistan? Is that true, despite Baluchistan being one, if not the most militarized regions in Pakistan?
Well, certainly, Baluchistan has become extremely militarized because within the Baloch community, there are extremists and terrorists who the state is trying to wipe out. Now, the problem is that what you need at the moment are both governments, Iran and Pakistan, need to attempt some kind of peace and reconciliation with their own population. And we're not seeing that at all. For many years, we haven't seen that. The insurgency in Pakistan has been going on for nearly 50 years. In Iran, it's something similar. So bringing this to an end it cannot be left to the Israelis or the Americans or anyone else. It has to be the local governments have to empower their own people and encourage development and other such things, so that the young people do not head towards the militant road.
And Ms. Lodi, Mr. Marandi is saying that one of the reasons that Balochistan is so underdeveloped is because of American sanctions. Is that the only reason? Balochistan has mineral riches, it has gold and zinc and oil and gas. It provides around half of the countries of Pakistan's energy needs, and yet something like half of its cities don't have access to the natural gas.
Well, I think there have been problems of underdevelopment in Balochistan. There's no question about that. But the Pakistani federal government has been trying in recent years to address that issue. But what has not helped is, of course, Pakistan's grave economic crisis, which has left the country cash-strapped. So I think there are many dimensions to this issue. But I do think this suggestion that Pakistan does not have control of Balochistan, I think it's preposterous. Of course it has control of Balochistan. But what it is struggling against are the activities of certain terrorist groups. And that's not unusual. Along this border with Iran, as I said, both countries have had complaints, they've made complaints to each other about the presence of militant groups on either side of the border. And I think that is what Pakistan has been trying to respond to. But if we look at the current situation, I think there is a need, as I said before, for de-escalation between Pakistan and Iran. After all, as I said before, these two countries had been improving relations in recent years. In fact, after the Saudi-Iranian rapprochement, which, as you know, was mediated by China, there was a real spurt in activity, diplomatic activity between Tehran and Islamabad, and we'd seen, in fact, an intensification of efforts to improve trade relations between the two countries. Now, you know, all of that now is going to take a backseat until the two countries are able to re-engage. Remember one thing, the two countries have not suspended diplomatic relations. They've recalled their ambassadors from each other's capital. Actually, Pakistan was the one that did that first. But diplomatic relations have not been suspended. And therefore, there is room, I think, for this diplomatic space. There's room for the two countries to re-engage once tempers come down, once the temperature comes down. And I think that's what needs to be done. For Pakistan, it's crucial. The relationship with Iran for Pakistan has been a strategic compulsion for an obvious reason, because Pakistan has troubled borders with India as well as with Afghanistan. And therefore, to have a normal, stable relationship with Iran has been of utmost importance for Pakistan, and it remains so. So what I think is really perplexing, and it defies all logic, is why Iran chose at this point in time to carry out these strikes, not just against my country, but also against Syria and in Iraq. And at a time when Iran had managed to come out of its diplomatic isolation, it seems to have been walking back into this isolation in the region.
Well, let's put that question to Mr. Marandi. Iran's certainly been very busy over the last few days. Strikes in Iraq on what it says is an Israeli spy base in Kurdish Iraq, in Erbil. It also carried out attacks in Syria. It said on groups that are linked to ISIL and who are responsible for the attack in Kerman 2 weeks ago. Can Iran afford to be fighting on another front?
Well, Iran is not fighting Pakistan, but I'll get to that in a moment. The strike on Syria was not on territory held by the Syrian government. It was held, the territory is held by terrorist groups. It was the Turkestan Islamic Party, which has members from China, Central Asia, and it's very closely associated with ISIS. So the Syrian government would definitely be happy that the Iranians carried out that attack. In Kurdish Iraq, this is an old problem, and Iran has carried out strikes before, and it's no secret that there are terrorist bases there. International media does documentaries on it. They go to those bases, they meet the members of those terror groups, and they often, Western media glorifies them. So what's going on in northern Iraq there's no controversy about it. With regards to what happened with Pakistan, as the previous guest rightly said, there was a delegation in Pakistan. The Iranians were not planning an attack. What happened was, as you know, we had a series of terror attacks near the Pakistani border, and in one, 100 people were killed. That was, of course, ISIS and most probably Israel, a different group, but they came in through Pakistan. Not that the Pakistani government had anything to do with it.
Yeah,
but just let me finish. The final point. This group was about Jaish al-Adl, was about to carry out another strike. They had gathered in their two bases. They were about to leave towards the border. The Iranians had 30 minutes to make a decision. The people in the field made that decision that we have to prevent this attack, otherwise there will be another outrage. The government has elections in a few weeks. We have parliamentary elections, and people are very angry with the government that they've allowed 100 people, that under their watch, 100 people were killed in Kerman, 11 soldiers were killed alongside the border a few weeks ago. So they made that decision. It was a tough call, but I think hopefully now the Iranian government and the Pakistani government will have to sit down together and really find a solution for the border. They have to create an infrastructure so that terrorism and smuggling will come to an end there.
And certainly both countries say that they don't want an escalation. Mr. Rashid, how much do you think both countries are playing to their domestic audience, domestic pressures here with these attacks? Mr. Marandi mentioned himself the elections that are coming up in Iran. The Iranian public is not happy about the worst attack on Iranian territory, the one in Kerman 2 weeks ago, since the founding of the Islamic Republic in 1979. There is an general election coming up in Pakistan next month too.
I do think that this is a very important factor that has also been missed out upon, that both countries, Iran and Pakistan, are facing a failure in their counterterrorism policies so far. Pakistan is faced with terrorism not just in Baluchistan, but much more in the northwest frontier, a province where they're battling the TTP, which is the Pakistani Taliban group that is organized in Afghanistan and crosses the border and launches attacks inside Pakistan. And Iran had a spate of terrorist attacks recently, with numerous people calling out various people being accused of helping that along. But the fact is, both countries have not been successful so far. And yes, it's a cliche to say this, but it has to be said that one way that they can divert domestic attention on the eve of elections, diverted domestic attention to precisely include the fact that they are not winning the war against terrorism, I think it's a very important factor. And until governments certainly governments have control of their region and their areas, but they don't have control in winning the war against terrorism. That continues. Pakistan has been beleaguered in this aspect for a very long time, going back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the flood of refugees that came across then. So Iran and Pakistan have got very similar problems, which they're not yet being able to tackle jointly in a more friendly manner.
All right. Ms. Lodhi, we have Iran's Revolutionary Guard saying that it will launch large-scale military exercises in the country's southeast near Pakistan. Do you think Islamabad could see this as a provocation following these attacks?
No, I think Islamabad is reassured that once it has taken the action that it has taken, it was aimed at deterring any further strikes by Iran. And in fact, Pakistan's strike into Iran was also designed to signal to any other country which may contemplate similar action and try to come into Pakistani territory. So I think Pakistan is quite confident that what it has done, and it has done it in a very measured way, in a very proportionate way. But I do want to respond to what Ahmed just said about Pakistan and Iran having similar problems. I think there can't be two countries more dissimilar in how they have confronted some of their domestic issues. We in Pakistan do have an election, but that doesn't mean that the action Pakistan took was meant to divert attention away from the election. Quite the contrary. Pakistan didn't start this fight. It was initiated by Iran, as you well know. And for Pakistan to take the position that it did and then to strike, I think was also designed to show that if Iran thought that Pakistan's army was preoccupied with election duties, which of course elections are only 2.5 weeks away, well, they were mistaken. And the signal was very much that don't underestimate Pakistan's ability and the means that it has to retaliate. And retaliate it did. But as I said before, Pakistan does not wish to inflame the situation. There is a need to de-escalate. And I think we will see efforts towards de-escalation in the coming days.
Okay, Mr. Marandi, do you think that Iran has got that signal? You said that this attack was carried out because they had information that they had half an hour to act on. What if they receive information, again, that these groups are planning another attack? Is it going to risk inflaming the relationship with Pakistan again at this point?
Well, I think, first of all, we shouldn't misread the situation. The fact is that 100 Iranians were killed, and they were all innocent civilians, and they went as families. And many of them were women, many of them were children who died in Kerman. And the 11 soldiers who were killed alongside the border, they were young men. And we had a series of other killings near the Pakistani border over the past few weeks, all of them young men, all of them having families. The Iranian government is responsible for the safety of ordinary Iranians. At the same time, Iran wants to preserve the best of ties with Pakistan. The two countries have to secure the border. Pakistan has to do more to secure its side of the border. The Iranians have to help Pakistan in that regard. Hopefully, this will not be necessary. Any maneuvers in the southeast of Iran are in order to make sure that that area is secure. It has nothing to do with the Pakistani government. I think there are third parties that have a vested interest in creating divisions between Iran and Pakistan, and people may get emotional. But the fact is that the bond between Iran and Pakistan is very strong, and that the terrorists will not be able to, and their backers will not be able to create a divide and distract attention away from Gaza.
Mr. Rashid, when Mr. Marandi talks about how the two countries have to work together to secure this border, it's a 900-kilometer long border, very mountainous, very porous. How can they do that? It's something that they haven't been able to do yet.
Well, I think it's premature to be able to even talk about the border when there are so many tensions on the ground. The tension between states, Iran and Pakistan, which I hope will get at least cooled down in the next few weeks and months as both sides come together and deal with this in a diplomatic way. But the other, I go back to what I said originally, that unless there's going to be a more serious attempt to look at the deprivation of the Baloch in both Iran and in Pakistan and improve the quality of life that they have or don't have, you're going to get these areas like Baluchistan and like the Northwest Frontier are going to be breeding grounds for terrorism. And what is needed is a strategy, a policy, which addresses some of the local domestic issues. And that, unfortunately, both countries, Iran and Pakistan, have not been very good at doing.
Ms. Lodi, do you think that that is something the Pakistani government is capable of doing after, 70 years of people in Balochistan fighting for greater autonomy?
No, I think you are completely mistaken in depicting it that way. There are groups there which are foreign-sponsored and foreign-supported, which are active, but by no means do they represent the mainstream of Baloch opinion. Yes, Pakistan does need to address underdevelopment in Balochistan, but I think if we look at the Pakistan-Iran dynamic right now, I think there is, let's not forget that there has been intelligence cooperation between the two countries on dealing with Daesh. So both countries have a lot to lose if if the tensions continue. So I think we are going to, at least it's my hope that we will see not just de-escalation, but a serious effort by both sides to agree on the kind of border management that addresses the security concerns of both countries.
All right, Mr. Marandi, just lastly, we don't have very long left in the program. China is a close ally. Both countries is urging restraint. Do you see China playing a role in here, or is it not necessary?
China could play a role. Perhaps since, as your previous guest pointed out, Pakistan has economic difficulties, perhaps China, for their own interests, could help create part of the border infrastructure to protect the borders and help prevent terrorism and smuggling. But I think that what Ahmed says is true. Iran, for example, has tried to develop the country. It's a somewhat left-leaning country anyway, but Iran has been under sanctions. As I said, some of the projects with Pakistan haven't gone through because of the Americans, but also the economy has struggled, and both Iran and Pakistan have to do more for their populations to make the deprived feel better engaged in society.
Mr. Marandi, thank you very much for that. I'm afraid we'll run out of time, but thank you to all of our guests, Ahmed Rashid in Lahore, Maliha Lodi in Islamabad, and Mohammad Marandi in Mashhad. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Elizabeth Puranam, and the whole team here, bye for now.